So with the Sami win over Melo that happened on this past SmackDown, that kind of now put or punched his ticket into, WrestleMania essentially against Trick right now, it seems. A lot of people have been kind of contesting the whole kind of finish, obviously, since it seems like Melo and Trick, or Melo, Ilya, and some combination of the people that were kind of involved in that US mid-card title scene were going to have some sort of like showcase match at Mania. I think a lot of people are kind of blindsided by Sami taking the belt from Melo right here, just because, it is on such short notice, this close to WrestleMania. But at the same time, I think it actually is a cool story that we can tell here that doesn't really count Melo out of WrestleMania just yet. I think obviously kind of with Trick and Sami, since Trick has kind of debuted already intertwined with Sami essentially, I think this kind of does make logical sense and is more of a bigger money match than kind of putting the full kind of go on Trick and Melo facing off at Mania. We should really wait and build that more up when there's more context to their rivalries and they're really trying to ascend up the card. I think that can be a really great rivalry that they can revisit. That obviously was from those NXT days, but I think the potential in it can happen if they're a little bit more they've grown a little bit more down the line. I think it would be more fun to revisit that. I don't think they should do it just yet. So I do think kind of actually having Sami here kind of take the title from Melo is kind of interesting, because I think it does point a obvious target on Sami's back with Melo and Trick, but Trick and Sami already have their contacts, and now Melo kind of does have it in at WrestleMania if he does want to kind of get involved, because of essentially Trick getting involved in Melo's business and this whole kind of triad happening. I think more likely than not, you'll probably see a triple threat at Mania if Melo just doesn't get involved in the match. But it did kind of point me to a bigger conversation I wanted to kind of talk about regarding Sami Zayn specifically, because he obviously is in a position that WWE extremely values him in, and with, I think, WrestleMania 43 being in Saudi Arabia, I could potentially see Sami kind of main eventing the show, for a world title match. I don't know if he'll win it necessarily, but I do kind of see that happening in Saudi. And I say that just because Sami will find himself somehow involved, if he's not injured, obviously for 41, but like for 40 and for 42, this upcoming one, he kind of had a similar situation where he wasn't directly involved with Gunther primarily, but then through nooks and crannies and kind of navigating the world of WWE, he eventually lined up a shot against Gunther, right, for that IC title, and then had that upset, ending that title reign, which a lot of people contested at the time. But in ring and how that match went, it was probably the best, besides maybe I'm thinking Bayley and Io at that WrestleMania. It was probably the best bell-to-bell match on the card. It was a crazy finish with Sami doing the top rope brainbuster callback to take. It was a super finisher that he had to do to take out Gunther, which I think respectfully at Mania is the way you take down someone like Gunther. And also, obviously it was the IC title. Gunther needs to go on to way bigger and better things, which we've seen happen down the line. So I think that we're all kind of dooming and glooming a little bit about the whole kind of 42 situation, but like I said, they do obviously trust Sami to be in these big kind of matches and stuff, and insert him because he's obviously a draw for the company just in general. Like, Canada, obviously they'll literally bring him out because he's always a draw over there, and obviously up in Saudi, but just over everywhere he goes, he does get a great reaction from the fans. So when people do kind of complain about his presence, it's like, well, why do we love him so much? He always delivers insanely intense promos, or is always good at essentially just delivering energy for whatever role he's kind of playing, and you always kind of see that. And then his in-ring work is one of the best of all time, like whether and that, to me, that least part, the bell-to-bell work of Sami Zayn, objectively, in my opinion, you can't deny. He's all around been such a top get for WWE, especially when he could have easily been an indie legend AEW kind of guy, like easily, you know what I mean? But he was able to kind of, even under the Vince era, have a lot of notable and great stuff kind of like on the main roster and hold titles, so I think them kind of maybe building a culmination to Sami kind of challenging for the title again at WrestleMania, because I think they tested the waters here with Drew and him at the Royal Rumble, where I actually did predict that Sami was going to win the Royal Rumble, but that didn't kind of happen. And I think especially with the Mania being over there, they can kind of pull that trigger and have that theoretical that we saw kind of between Drew and Sami here at this past year's Royal Rumble. We can kind of get a bigger version of that, maybe versus Roman, versus whoever the champ might be at the time, maybe Gunther again, or whoever they might want to kind of throw Sami's way to be that ultimate underdog against, right? I do think, Sami's popularity is also pretty obvious to anyone who watches probably from the outside, because he always elicits a great reaction, but it's the people who watch week to week who kind of get, I think, tired of the lack of booking consistency that the character gets specifically, which creates this disconnect between that online internet audience and then the casual audience that's just watching every week, isn't gonna go to Twitter or whatever the hell to say like what they dislike or like. They're just gonna watch it all about their day, right? Sami is a wrestler who kind of did have his come up amongst that crowd who is on the internet, but has kind of transitioned towards being obviously one of the ultimate main roster guys. The thing is with that and how WWE books, like, because it's the same thing I think that's happened to Becky Lynch, that same thing with Cody Rhodes. Like, fans turn on a lot of the wrestlers out of their grievances with the plot and booking rather than the actual performances and things that we're seeing like happen. Like, that match between him and Melo was amazing, and yeah, it was a surprise win, and it got a crazy pop. Like, that was what the effect of WWE is trying to do, and I've kind of realized that too. And it does mean that the plot and the consistencies do take a backseat on purpose to serve these kind of moments. So now at Mania we can have even a greater moment, maybe in Melo, Trick, Sami, and Ilya, or something happening essentially that it kind of results in a crazy maybe Mania moment for everybody, elevating the US title. And I think also it's kind of telling of, I think, Sami's trajectory just moving forward as well. I think they always put a lot of trust in him, which is super fair. I think he's always been a solid promo. He always does great work. They put him with, even when they were putting him with Carrie, and they were putting him with a lot of different guys, so I think help showcase those characters and make them look good, and I just think a lot of people do get annoyed when he gets thrown a bone, just because the way he gets thrown a bone, I think that as of late has felt not has not felt strong. Essentially, it's just been done extremely poorly, but I do think that Melo will find his way at Mania. I don't think they'll make him sit out like that, but it seems like the trend to be part of the storyline recently is to kind of cut people from Mania and kind of take that resentment and juice and put that fire into their characters, which is okay, but I don't like that too much. I think mentally for some people, I don't think that's fair. But, I kind of, if that's the route that they're trying to take with it, that's totally fair. I think it did lead for a super crazy kind of, title change, and it makes you, over this last kind of year in 26 and even the last half of 5 with a lot of these mid-card titles, they've been kind of, or all the titles have been kind of tossing back and forth. So, I think it's finally, after such an era where we had such long reigns, maybe it's more the idea that we're not used to titles genuinely changing for as a prop to move things forward. I think Sami's just another kind of, not necessarily victim, but he's one of the vessels being used for that for Trick and Melo. I think people need to kind of see that more than just seeing Melo losing a title and now, oh, he's not going to be at Mania. I don't think it's going to be that necessarily linear. Hopefully not. It totally could be, knowing WWE, because things can get to that point if the lack of resources and timing happens, which does happen. So, but just in general, I think, we're kind of poo-pooing this too much when Sami is a top talent. It's him and Trick, if on paper these two have a match at Mania, it should be kind of excellent anyway. I think get ready for really another heavy Sami push, just because I think, because he does so well and, he's always someone who can elevate everybody. I think he's finally going to get like his solo flowers at this upcoming Saudi Mania, so kind of good for Sami for winning the US title again Zayn for getting another kind of title belt under his waist. I think they are really easing people into the idea that Sami Zayn can be a world champion with having him constantly attain and defeat and be able to overcome the odds, not specifically in the situation he needs to, but in everywhere else, and I think it's going to eventually become, when can Sami win the big one? When can he finally become a Grand Slam champion? And that's going to be most likely at WrestleMania 43 in the main event. I think it would be an awesome story to tell. You know what I mean? I think at the same time as well, like, I don't think the pop, like, for me, it's more of like, I think you would be able to sell a main event there more with having Sami in the main event and vying for the title than if you had it at other places, really specifically. And I feel like the way WWE books, they book towards that. So I would very likely, like, I would maybe even put a sum of money on that. I think Sami will have a significant impact or be in the main event of WrestleMania 43. For some reason, especially with how he's now involved in 42 and how I think they see him, as how valuable he is. Yeah, like I absolutely can see it, especially, or even if they were to do a Canada WrestleMania 2, I can see him kind of main eventing there and contending for the belt, because I think they want his first title win, if he ever does have it, to be somewhere monumental. I don't think they want to do it on a Raw or a SmackDown. They want it to be extremely meaningful because Sami isn't necessarily a champion character, so I don't see him really having a long reign with a world title, even if he were to grab on it. He does feel like the guy who does get cashed in on, after winning it. He does feel like that fleeting kind of fire when he does, like, kind of have or attain that success. We got to see kind of how they book it, but I do think that Sami is going to be kind of main eventing WrestleMania 43 in Saudi, and I think the US title is in kind of good hands, because I think even moving beyond WrestleMania, we're gonna get a lot of cool thorough lines, maybe even between Tama, Shinsuke, and everybody kind of involved, it seems like, in this US title kind of vortex, it seems like. But I don't think it's the end of the world that Sami kind of won the US title, but I do think it's an indication of bigger plans for Sami moving forward, especially even since 40, having him defeat Gunther and having him constantly mingle as well with the top guys and teasing kind of character changes and motivations and the chase for the title over this long period, I think is all to build to this WrestleMania 43. Let me know if you guys kind of agree in the comments. I know it's kind of a more focused thing instead of focusing on everything on SmackDown, but this was the most interesting part to me of the show. I know Cody and Randy are kind of having their kind of classic feud right now. Maybe we'll kind of analyze that in full once I kind of take that all in and really process it. But right now I kind of wanted to talk about kind of just that title change and what that could possibly kind of mean moving forward and stuff like that. And I think also, like I said, it's not the end of the world for Trick or Mello. Obviously Trick's going to be at that Mania, right? But there's a story there, like Mello kind of has always had to prove himself up to Trick, on that perception where it's like, what, at the end of the day, Mello might be better bell to bell, but Trick has that presence and aura. And unfortunately, despite, like, there's a lot of things that make their dynamic really interesting, I think. And I think that this is going to be another wrinkle in their storytelling when they get to really feud and be able to really analyze those things and put that together in promos and do stuff like that. So I think there's a lot we can actually take from this instead of just last minute booking, because like at the end of the day they need to make a WrestleMania a really big build regardless. And Trick and Mello themselves are both relatively new, so you need to put someone who has some sort of status or name into this to involve to elevate the feud for Mania, and maybe that's what we're doing with Sami Zayn right now. Let me know what you guys kind of think of the whole situation. Let me know what you guys kind of think about Sami potentially, main eventing WrestleMania 43 in Saudi, and how that will go down, how that would be booked out. I think they've already been planting the seeds for the past couple of years already, or at least a year and a half already, about his specific intention for the world title and WWE title. So we'll kind of see what goes down with that. But let me know what you guys think, how you guys thought about SmackDown and stuff, and I'll see you guys in the next video.